for just a moment real quick what the textbooks all tell us, right? So what is the common knowledge or the conventional wisdom on the difference between the two? So when we look at management, it's about coping with complexity, right? When we look at leadership, it's about coping with change. And that's the big difference there. One is complex. We're monitoring results. We're taking corrective action. We're solving those technical problems. But leadership is about the strategy. Where do we want to go? How are we going to initiate change? How are we going to be innovative and adapt as necessary, right? Can we integrate all the assigned resources to us and move through, right? So the biggest difference is management is about getting things done. Leading is about getting things changed. My mother used to say that managers do things right, leaders do the right things. Managers do things right, leaders do the right things, right? And so with that in mind, we have some maxims that we go by, right? So first off, you just can't get it all done and do it right, right? You can't do everything by yourself. You're going to have to learn to delegate. You're going to have to learn to put everything together. And also understand that doing it yourself, hands-on work, is not the same as leading. You have to be able to delegate. You have to get more pressure, and you have to put more involvement there, right? So you have to be able to lead rather than just manage. Also understand, bullet point number 3 here is of utmost importance, right? What's important to you is probably not important to everybody else. And so you have to think about how you're going to pull all of that together and make everybody happy. It's not easy to do, right? But you're going to have to figure out a way to get it done, else you're just going to be managing your little task and you're not going to get it done. And so it's tough, it's exciting, but it's well worth it, right? Now, what you see here is what's called the network of stakeholders, and these are the people that you have to think about. And notice that the project manager is at the center of the project, right? So you've got your team of people that you work with, but then you have other project managers and other functional managers. Then you've got other organizations, you've got customers to deal with, government agencies, contractors, everybody. Putting all that together to manage these projects effectively is not necessarily an easy task, but it is one that's well worth it, right? So what I want to talk to you about today is ways that you can actually get that done, right? One of them is this idea of influence as exchange, right? So what we mean is that if you help me, I'll help you, or I'll help you before we do, right? So if I need something, you need something, let's work together. Another way to say this is that many hands make light work. So if we can all pile together, put all this together and make it happen as we move forward, then we'll all be fine together, right? Now, this next thing here we've heard before in the news 100 times over, right, is this idea of quid pro quo. This means you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. You do something for me and I'll do something for you. And frankly, there's not anything wrong with that. It becomes wrong when there are specific laws prohibiting you from doing that. It becomes wrong when you're trying to curry favor. It is not wrong for you to say, hey, if you help me, I'll help you. But it is wrong when it crosses the line and becomes illegal. And so one of the things we have to look at is this idea of what's called influence currencies, right? So Cohen and Bradford said an influence currency is ways for you to put money in the bank, help people before you need them. Another way to say this is you have to dig your well before you're thirsty, so that you have a supply of water before it becomes necessary. Go have conversations with people. Go talk with them. Develop an understanding of what you need and help them before you get there. Make sense? So somebody have a question?
Yeah. Is it kind of like similar to investing, or is that different?
So it is, right? You invest in the market before you need the money so that you have it later on in life. This is the same way. Instead of investing money, though, you're investing your time, your effort, and energy in people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? All right. So now let's talk about the ways we do that. So we have what's called task-related and position-related currencies. Task-related are those things like you were saying, look, you need resources. I'm going to make sure you get a budget increase to get that done. I'm going to help you out behind the scenes, right? I'm going to help you do your job and you help me do my job. I'm going to give you the information necessary to do what you need to do. Position-related currencies are those things that only because you're in that position can I give it to you. If you do this for me, I'll make sure you get that promotion, right? Or you take the people who have the recognition, who have done a good job, who have made accomplishments and have abilities, and you promote them, right? Okay. Maybe giving them the networks and the contracts that they need. You can also have what's called inspiration-related currencies, and this is where you're casting the vision, right? Doing the right thing, having the ethical correctness, being excellent in your work so that other people want to be a part of who you are, right? Then you have what's called relationship-related currencies. I accept you for who you are. You and I are friends, and so I'm going to help you, right? And you'll notice that as we go from one to the next, we're going deeper and deeper into our psyche here, right? So here, in the task-related currencies, this is the everyday, routine, mundane things. But as we move forward into the personal related things, this is where you are building a relationship with people. This isn't just, I need you, you're actually building relationships with people. And I'm going to be honest with you, that's one thing that's always been a struggle for me. Building relationships with people does not come easy to me because I think that you should just do a good job, whether I'm giving you a pat on the back or not, okay? However, I have come to understand that some folks need that personal support. They need that emotional backing. And so you have to be able to move forward and develop that for them, okay? All right. Now, let's talk about the next one, which is stakeholder dependencies, right? Thinking about whose cooperation are we going to need? Whose agreement will I need? You need to think about those things in advance before you move forward, right? Think about how you're pulling all of those things together. What are the pieces of the puzzle that are going to fit in together? We're going to talk in a slide or two about this thing called systems thinking, where what you do in one situation is going to have consequences and repercussions for the entire situation as a whole. And so you have to think about that, right? Think about it from the perspective of other stakeholders. If I did this for them, how is that going to look? What are the optics of the situation? How will they look at the project? And how will they pull it all together? And so one of the ways that you can manage that is what's called management by walking around. This is getting out of your office and actually going down to other people, having conversations with them. And you spend the majority of your time in those face-to-face interactions with them and developing and building the cooperative relationships. Now, right now, we're in a position where that isn't necessarily the case, right? You can't always find ways to do that, but we have to find ways. And this right now, what we're going through, this is what every business is having to go through. Price Waterhouse is still making customers and they're still developing clients. You know, Shearson Lehman, Goldman Sachs, every one of these, they still have to find a way to be professional, to be above board, and to develop your project as you see fit and how you can develop it in a positive way. And so you have to figure out a way to stay in contact and stay in touch with people. Chime is one of those ways. AWS has provided us with that. Zoom is another way, having just face-to-face calls or whatever, you know, doing FaceTime. All of those things are good, solid ways where you can pull that together, okay? So here are some characteristics of good project managers or effective project managers, right? First thing is you're the one who initiates the contact. Second, you anticipate potential problems. You provide encouragement and you reinforce the objectives and visions. And then finally, you intervene to resolve the conflicts, okay? Now let's talk about that second one right there, anticipating potential problems. If someone is on your team and they are gung-ho about the project and they absolutely positively want to get it done, you're like, yes, let's do it now. Boom, boom, power through it. When you raise objections or you look at potential problems, they're going to think that that means you're not on board. So you're going to have to reinforce the concept. Say, look, I'm on board with this. I think we need to move it forward. However, I have seen a couple of problems that might derail it down the road. So we need to think about how we can make this happen, right? How we can fix it down the road. So you need to head that off and know and provide that encouragement before you anticipate the potential problems. And let me also see the last one on the board down there where it says intervene to resolve conflicts and prevent stalemates. You need to do that sooner rather than later. The longer you wait for the problem to happen and you intervene, the bigger the problem is going to be and the more resources it will take to fix the problem. Okay? And so with that in mind, what we need for our project to be successful is this concept of top management support. You need to have the people at the top, the people in the administration, your management team needs to be on board with this and tell you, hey, we need to get this done. We need to move through this. You need to have your budget approved, making sure that you have responsiveness. Do you have a clear signal from the organization that this is important? If you don't, no matter what you do, it ain't going to work. Let me give you a concrete example of that. I'm the program coordinator for the data analytics program, and I was also program coordinator for cybersecurity until Dr. George Antonio was hired. In the process of building these projects, I knew that I was going to have to get top level support. So before I even began putting the project together, I had a series of meetings with the CIO, Chris Bonaforte, and other individuals in the IT department who helped me to understand what we would need to do to get our budget done, to make sure that we had that clear signal. And by having someone in the C-suite on the team, it sent a clear signal to everybody else that this is important, we need to get it done, right? And so that also helped to motivate the project team so that we had this idea that the top managers on the team helped me to pull back if necessary, to provide additional resources, help me to give a pat on the back from those people at the top. And that goes a long way toward actually getting the project done. The reason for that is because you're always going to have someone trying to rain on your parade. You're always going to have someone who is thinking, hey, are we really necessary? Is this done? And so you as the project sponsor and the project manager are going to be the one that has to shelter your project from the storms that would wash it away. Now, one of the ways you can do that is by being what's called a 360-degree leader. Has anybody ever heard of the concept of 360-degree leadership? Right?
I sort.
Yep. So you've heard of it, right?
Where is this? I don't see it in the PowerPoint on Canvas.
I don't know if it's on there or not, but I'll make sure you get a copy of this. And for sure, it's going to be in the study guide.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Okay. So 360-degree leadership is this idea that you have to manage yourself, manage those people that are on the same level of you, your peers. You have to manage your subordinates, and you have to manage your boss, right? So if you go from left to right, the first thing that you need to do is lead yourself. You need to be consistent. You need to be honest. You need to be open and above board. Then you need to start leading your peers. Then think about your boss before you finally bring it down to your subordinates. The reason for that is because as you're leading each of these groups simultaneously, the last ones that need to hear about problems are the subordinates, not the first ones, the last ones. Okay? So if you hear of a problem, the first thing you do is you go to people who are on the same level and say, hey, have you had this problem? And then you come up with a solution. You go to your boss, and once the solution has been made, you go to your subordinate and say, hey, we had a problem with X. Here's the solution. Okay? Make sense? So that way, you're not passing bad news downhill. You're not having everybody grumble and rumble. Okay? Now, with that in mind, you guys mentioned President Trump earlier. I will say that there has been a bit of a short circuit in the 360-degree leadership that we've seen coming from President Trump's office, right? He has competent and capable individuals on his staff. And in my opinion, he needs to do less of the talking and more of the listening when it comes to listening to these individuals. Does that make sense? So Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, other people like that, Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue, all of these people know what they're talking about. He needs to let them do their job. But that's my opinion, and it is just that, right? So in your career, you're also going to be faced with these things called ethical dilemmas. And this is where there is no right or wrong, right? It is no right or wrong. It is, sometimes it's just the one that's the least bad. There is no right or wrong. Sometimes it is, okay, which one is the best solution? And there are sometimes when it's cut and dry. Padding your cost estimates, that's wrong. Exaggerating the payoffs, wrong. Accusing or assuring customers that everything is on track. That's wrong. Doing all of those things you see on the screen right there, absolutely wrong thing to do. Those are easy to pinpoint, right? Here's the hard ones. You can't do both projects at the same time. You have to pick one, and the other one's going to have to be, sorry, I can't do your project. Which one do you decide, right? Make sense? That's not easy to do. So the way you overcome that is you have a code of conduct. You have to make the hard decisions before the moment of decision comes. You have to decide what kind of person you are going to be long before you get into the situation where you have to make that decision. If you don't, in the moment of decision, you're not going to make it. You're not. You're going to make the wrong decision. The next thing we want to talk about is this idea of trust, right? So how do we define trust? How is trust defined in your mind?
I think trust is having support of the stakeholders around you in a project.
Okay, so that's good. I like that idea, right? You have the support. And why do they support you?
Because they know that they can rely on you as a leader or manager of a project.
All right, and how did they come to that conclusion? How do they know they can rely on you?
You've consistently shown results. You've shown support for them in certain situations.
Right, it's consistency, right? Consistency is the key to trust. Consistency is the key to trust. Whether that be positive consistency or negative consistency. There are a lot of people that I have encountered in my career that I trust to do the wrong thing. They never showed me anything other than I'm going to screw this up. And so I trusted them that if I gave them a project, they were going to screw it up. And therefore I didn't give them the important projects, right? So how do you develop it? Character and competence. Character and competence, right? Character focusing on your personal motivation, competence focusing on your skills. Character and competence. And if you have both, then you have trust, right? In the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey says that the focus should be on your character ethics, right? And the core of most highly effective people are those that have a high character ethic. You're consistent, you're open, and you have a sense of purpose. Consistent, open, and have a sense of purpose. If you haven't ever read this book, this is one that you should read, especially in your early 20s. It would be a great read for you to come by and say, hey, this is what we need to be, and so on and so forth, okay? All right, so now let's talk about some contradictions in project management. I'm gonna go over these, but they're not really that important. I don't want you to focus too much on those, right? Project managers have to be able to innovate while they're still maintaining stability. We have to be able to see the big picture, be strategic while getting our hands dirty, being tactical. We have to know when to take a flexible or a firm hand. Sometimes the individual needs to be stressed and sometimes the team needs to be stressed. Sometimes we have to think about the team versus the organization. Is it more important for my kids or is it more important for the university, right? And if I ever have to make a decision, I always err on the side of my students. I always err on making the decision that's going to be best for the students rather than making the decision that's best for the university. And I can tell you that Dr. Katrina Carter-Tellison and Dr. R.T. Good, the Vice President of Academic Affairs and the Dean of the College of Business, feel exactly the same way. They are always 100% in favor of doing what's right for the students, okay? All right, now with that in mind, let me tell you something that does work for being an effective project manager. First, you have to be a systems thinker. You have to think about how does each piece of the puzzle fit together? What are each of the things that work? And there's a great book on systems thinking, and I cannot remember the author's name, but I can look that up and I'll get you a link if you're interested. So if you want to know about the book on systems thinking, shoot me an email and I'll find it for you, okay? The second one is personal integrity. Doing what's right even when nobody's looking, right? Being the person that's in charge and making sure that you have that together. Being proactive rather than reactive. What I mean by that is You have to get out ahead of it and think about the process before rather than being reactive. Let's look at number 4, this idea of high emotional intelligence, or EQ. Have you guys heard that concept in other classes? Cole, did Dr. Rao mention that in her class?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Did Dr. Rao mention about high emotional intelligence, or EQ, in her class on leadership?
A little bit, but we haven't got. We're gonna have a whole section on EQ. We haven't got to yet, but yeah, she had mentioned it a little bit.
Okay. Has anybody been through BUS 270 and you mentioned EQ, right? Or do you know what EQ is, right? Okay.
Yeah, I've heard of the concept.
All right. So explain it in your own words.
I think emotional intelligence is the ability to handle highly emotional situations and understand different people's perspectives or feelings. It's more for like conflict management. I would think that's where it would come in handy.
It certainly does come in handy there, right?
Yeah.
Let me tell you some other examples of where it comes in. In Louisiana right now, New Orleans has been very hard hit by the COVID-19 virus. Part of that is because it hit at the same time that Mardi Gras was going on, and the folks who were reveling and partying in Mardi Gras kind of shared it across the state. While the politicians always seem to have their own agenda, and the majority of people in Louisiana voted for a gentleman named John Bel Edwards, who's a Democrat, right? There are the sizable number of people who don't trust the man. As a matter of fact, he would come out and, just like you have Governor DeSantis now or others, they would say, you need to do this and you need to make sure you're sheltering in place. You need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, and so on and so forth. And the folks in Louisiana did not take him seriously. Okay. It became such a problem that instead of him dealing with that and getting flustered, he asked the coach of LSU's football team, Ed Ogeron, to do a public service announcement. And when Ed Ogeron came out and said, we need to do these things, then the attitude in Louisiana changed. Now, I want to talk about the idea of emotional intelligence from both of these gentlemen, right? So, did Governor Edwards show high emotional intelligence in that situation? And did Ed Ogeron show high emotional intelligence in that situation? So what do y'all think? Anybody want to answer that? Or are you just kind of waiting for me to tell you what the answer is?
Well, like you said, when the governor, he wasn't really respected. He didn't really show high emotional intelligence. He was more like stand back and just let someone else do it. While the other one,
Okay.
he didn't show any at this point. He was actually more optimistic. So yeah, he showed high intelligence. So
Okay. All right. Was it the right thing to do to step out of the way and let someone else have the limelight?
yeah, that was
Okay. So that's a sign of high emotional intelligence, being let someone else have the spotlight, right? Okay. You can certainly do that, right? So in my opinion, I think that both of the gentlemen showed high emotional intelligence. On the one hand, the gentleman realized he wasn't being listened to and wasn't being heard. Rather than screaming and hollering about it, he said, you know what, if you don't want to listen to me, then maybe you listen to someone else. And he got someone that he knew folks would trust, right? So you also need to be skilled. So another trait of an effective project manager is understanding how you're going to effectively manage your time, right? And that is not necessarily an easy skill to learn because other things will always get in the way. Being able to say no to outside projects is always going to be a positive thing, okay? You also have to be a skillful politician, and that doesn't mean that you're trying to manipulate people. It just means you have to know how each of those pieces fit and how they're going to work together. And finally, being an optimist. It doesn't mean that you're pie in the sky Pollyanna. It just means that you're thinking about, hey, everybody's in this boat together. We have to pull through, and if we keep a positive attitude, we're certainly going to be able to make do, right? Okay. Now, here's some more suggestions, right? Again, building your relationships before you need them. This is what I meant when I said digging your well before you're thirsty. Understanding that you have to maintain and sustain trust through those face-to-face contacts, being able to talk with people, seeing what's going on, right? And then understanding that what comes around goes around, all right? So the key terms from this particular slideshow, or this particular lecture rather, are here on the screen. I'll let you take a look at that. And before we move on, do you have any last minute questions for me? Okay. All right. Okay. So if you don't have any more last minute questions for me, okay. Right. So Riley, you said, Riley, you said that maybe you should try that in New York, right? No one's listening to Governor Cuomo right now. Well, you know, his brother is actually trying, right? He's got a show on CNN. He's come down with coronavirus because he's on the nightly news every night. They're actually moving that forward. So Cuomo is trying. He's doing what he can, but it doesn't seem like anybody's listening to him, right? Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop the recording on this.